Welcome to the sixth and final episode of Zabani, a podcast event by the Statesmanship Program, where we try to showcase atypical topics in an unconventional manner. My name is Abhishek Sadhani. I'm a student of law at Nirma University, and I've been associated with the Statesmanship Program since more than a year. With me today is Advocate Vikrant Parshurami, who is the founder of P Legal and has been impaneled as a panel advocate, arbitrator, and dispute resolution professional at various companies, entities, and organizations. These include Tata Capital Housing Finance Limited, Municipal Corporation of Greater Mumbai, IFCO Tokyo Insurance Company Limited, and many more. We are truly elated to have you with us, sir. The podcast is
Thank you,
our
Abhishek.
best. Welcome, sir. The podcast will be our best attempt to deliver our listeners with a legal perspective to various important topics of these times, and we will even be specifically touching upon IPR laws. So, before I move towards my first question, I'd like to mention that media is a very wide term. It includes various agents that cater you with varied content. But in present times, the problem that seems to wander upon is that the various forms of media have actually interchanged their roles. And when I say interchange their roles, I mean that let's consider social media. Social media, for that matter, is meant to be for something completely different. But nowadays, it is majorly engaged in delivering news, which is at many a times inaccurate. And whereas the form of media which is actually meant to deliver news is sadly in some sense delivering what may be termed as entertainment. Now the problem does not stand still here. The problem is also that the society seems to accept all of this. The society seems to enjoy all of this, which is a bit of more surprising. And over all of this we have the major issue of the controlled media. Now, what are your views when we try to give this scenario a legal perspective in context of the IT laws and the media laws that are prevalent in India, considering the fact that the changes in laws are followed by the changes that the society witnesses?
Correct. So first of all, Abhishek, thank you so much for your kind words.
Welcome.
And now coming to the topic, so see, basically in India, media to a great extent is governed by the provisions under Constitution. That is personally my view, because everyone nowadays is trying to harp upon the article wherein right to free speech or right of expression is something which is focused upon. But considering the laws that are actually governing some sort of media, so again, as you rightly pointed out, media is a very vast term. It does not stay restricted to a specific medium of communication. So it would be print media, it could be the news channel, it could be internet. And as you have rightly pointed out, the IT Act to some extent helps regulate, but then it helps regulate only when there is a crime, or maybe there is a problem, or there is an error. At that time, the IT Act comes into play. Otherwise, it does not help in any manner. So, and the laws which are governing the media. So, when I say media, I am talking about print media. So, the laws that are governing the print media are again providing the media, print media, a self-regulatory power. So, they are left on themselves. They are left to themselves to regulate their own functioning, to have guidelines. Again, they have their own setup, but that is restricted to the newspapers only. So when it comes to the print media or the social media for that matter, there is no specific law which is today giving them any kind of a regulation, any kind of a rule, or maybe any kind of guideline. So somewhere, considering the changing needs, the changing scenario, and the changing use of people in general of the different kind of media parallelly. So it is not that people at a certain time will use newspapers and then later will use news and then later will go to social media. Everything is happening parallelly. So we need to have a very robust network of laws, and we have to do away with the archaic laws which have been going on since the British era. So with respect to the changing scenario in media, the acceptance of people of the content, see, as long as we leave it to the people to maybe accept it or not, it is always going to be a debatable issue. So my perspective personally, I feel there needs to be a regulatory body for all type of media, and if that body is just like a single window body wherein all media regulation is focused through one specific body, and then there are sub divisions in that to look after different kinds of media, and then a detailed legislation of how this media, this specific one window body, or maybe that one regulating body is going to have control. Uh, Again, as I said, constitution is going to be the parent actor. So you cannot curb or you cannot stop media from showing something which is happening. But I would want to use the word production of news. So when a specific kind of media is producing news, they are generating a kind of news sensation. They are creating sensation out of a specific article or material. This particular sensationalization has to be somewhere governed. Self-regulator is fine. We have been self-regulated. We have been under the influence of self-regulated media, but then we've seen what is happening. I would not want to take examples of specific cases, but then we know what is happening today, and the effect of that is really not something which media is meant for. So media, as we look at it, I'll give an example of the newspaper Kesari. So the whole purpose was to let people know what is happening, let people know the perspective of a person of what is happening, and not shove into the people's face as this is the right thing, this is the wrong thing. So that needs to be somewhere regulated. So I feel we need to have, if not multiple laws, one law, a one window mechanism wherein everything goes through one place and then it is bifurcated. So yeah, that is what I feel regarding media in general, regulating media, having the legislation. And regarding IT Act, I feel that tilts towards dispute resolution. So once there is a problem, you use the IT Act to see whether the problem can be solved or not. So what I think is, don't let the problem start in the first place. So that you don't go to laws, you don't go to courts. Courts are already overburdened. So yeah, this is what I feel regarding media and how people automatically. I'll give a small example before we move on to the next aspect. So simple thing, something that you read in a newspaper. Do you always debate, discuss, or fight, or get panic attacks over what is stated in the newspaper? You don't.
Hardly.
Generally, people don't.
Hardly.
But what happens on a news channel? That causes a lot of problems. So the way newspapers and print media is regulated, they have the set of ethics, they have the set of guidelines, and they have a body to whom you can go and file a complaint, and that body can revoke the license. So you have an entire regulatory mechanism for print media. Similarly, a mechanism needs to be in place for all sorts of media. Again, it would be a debatable issue. How can you stop people from expressing their views? So nobody is stopping, or nobody is wanting to say that people should stop expressing their views. But there should be a way. There should be some sensitivity towards people's problems, and that requires a framework, legal framework, because everyone listens to what the law or the courts have to say. But when we leave it to self-regulatory mechanism, we have seen the effects so far.
I couldn't agree more with the unified legal framework that you tried to introduce, along with that even considers the individualistic components of all sorts of media, of the various types of media. Thanks a lot for this input, sir. We'll further move towards the second question. And the second questions revolve around, like, when we talk about the implications that the COVID-19 lockdown has brought along with itself, the sufferings that have been faced by the economy tops the list. Now, Indian government did introduce what it called as the world's largest food security scheme for 800 million people, and even brought amendments in laws like governing FDI to protect Indian companies from opportunistic takeovers, and even suspended IBC for that matter. Now, there were many more introductions, inclusions, modulations, modifications. Now, but the question stands that how effective have these measures been? And like, not only in terms of protecting the economy specifically, but also in terms of reviving the economy, like reviving and recompensating the loss that has already occurred.
Okay. So the thing is, to start with, the kind of schemes that the government has introduced are actually very good schemes if they are implemented well. One, that is one big if. Second, if they reach the people for whom they are meant. And that is where the main problem is. That is where the speed breaker is. So that is where the cars are actually halting at. So it is not reaching the people. again, so all of this has come for the first time, probably in most of our lives. I haven't seen a pandemic, not at this scale. Most of us haven't seen it. So similarly, the governments which are functioning right now, some of them might have experienced something on these lines, some of them might have not. So not taking sides, but then there are a lot of loopholes in these schemes. And by loophole, I mean to say that first of all, implementation is lacking. And I don't even need to spell it out because we are seeing the effect. There's no actual help that is happening to anybody because of this scheme. So that is one aspect. Second aspect is the loopholes that I'm talking about. So when we talk about the waiver of loan EMI, so the main amount is waived off. I can understand. But what banks are doing, banks have found out a loophole in that. The actual amount they are not asking for, but they're charging interest on interest. And this thing was probably either not thought about, or if it was thought about, then it was not clarified in the notification or in the whatever schemes were taken up. So such loopholes now that they are coming up, now that they are resurfacing or surfacing for the first time for some people. Now these need to be plugged in. So it's like having a good waterproof system and then having certain leakage points. So these leakage points are what are causing actual problems. So once you have identified these points, if they are plugged, if that is taken care of, I think these schemes are actually going to help us, come to a break-even point and then take the economy, northward. So what is happening right now is there are schemes in place. So if you have questions for people in power places, they will have these answers. Let's see, this is what is there. This is what we've done. This is what is working. But then when you ask the second question as to what is the problem with implementation, why are people not getting benefits, then there would be a difficulty in answering. So these are practical problems which we as people who are at the receiving end of this problem are facing. As I gave out an example, as I pointed out an example, that the main amount is taken care of. Okay, waiver for 6 months, 8 months, but that period is also gone. People are still not having the kind of work that they were having in probably say January, February, or March this year. So the kind of amount that was rolling in, even the GDP, the hit that the GDP has taken is a very good sign of what the problems are actually, economic issues. So these schemes are in place, I understand. The implementation and these problems, again, these can be fixed only with proper legislation, amendments, notifications, rules, whatever is required. Legal framework needs to be modified with the means. So it cannot be rigid. Once you've made a notification, once you've made a scheme, this is what will be applied. There will be no second thought. If this is the approach, then we are in a big problem. But then understanding the problem, and it's probably every 3 weeks or every, maybe 4 weeks, if these are modified based on the problems faced in implementation, I feel that is the place where, we could just have the answer for these issues. So this debate needs to keep going on, and these suggestions need to reach the right people, and they need to modify things. So, small example, now that we are facing this problem, we are facing the COVID-19 pandemic. Simple thing, if a patient goes with one symptom, the doctor will give him a specific medicine. If his symptoms change within 2 days, the medicine is changed the immediate day. So we have a problem and we have a solution the immediate, it's a ripple effect. One thing has happened, second thing will happen. So similar pattern, if it is applied for the legal framework, for the schemes that are being implemented, for reviving the economy and taking it in a better place, then it might help us, and probably we will end up utilizing the scheme for the actual purpose, for which they were actually meant for. Because if you see the schemes are really good. If you see the purpose of the scheme, they are actually meant to help people, but that is not happening. So this is where the gap needs to be filled in.
Thank you for recognizing the loopholes, and then aptly, I just specifically like the ripple effect that you just introduced and the ripple effect that you just mentioned about. Now we'll be nextly moving towards some specific questions towards IPR. So like there is this concept of patent pooling. Like it has been a vital instrument in supporting greater innovation, collaborating research and development, and even when it comes to solving problems. Patent pooling, apart from boosting mobile manufacturing and ensuring affordable treatment for HIV and many such other diseases, has even played a pivotal role during times of World War I. During these times of COVID-19 pandemic, how do you feel is the Indian legal framework relating to the IPR serving the facilitation of such concepts, and how effective can they get, or how effective can they get in letting in letting us free from the pandemic?
Correct. Okay. So, first of all, so patent pooling, just a brief idea about patent pooling. Um, uh, so patents are with respect to inventions, with respect to different kinds of medicines, generic terms I'm using. So, when so patent is basically owned by a person who applies for that patent, who basically invents a particular invention, or maybe, find a specific medicine. So any technological or scientific breakthrough would be worthy of a patent, and once that patent is taken by a particular person, that can be so the benefit out of it can be taken by that single person only. And by benefit, I mean the benefit of manufacturing, the benefit of earning benefits out of it, benefits in terms of monetary gain. So with patent pooling, one or more, so basically two or more entities can come together, can share all their data, which is patented, with respect to genetics, with respect to medicine, and utilize this information for a greater good. So, as you rightly pointed out, for World War I, it was used patent pooling. Then it was used for it is being even today it is being used for HIV treatment and medicine development. So, as on today, it is also being used for the treatment, for finding the treatment for COVID, and for finding a vaccine for COVID. So, with respect to India, I am not sure whether most of you have heard about the Nagoya Protocol. There is a protocol under the United Nations which was signed at Nagoya, Japan, wherein specifically regarding patent pooling. So the main focus here was pooling the patent, utilizing the data, the genetic material, and the advancement that different countries have, which are patented, and helping overcome a specific problem. And in this time, specifically COVID. With this, India has a Biodiversity Act, which allows functioning on the same line as the Nagoya Protocol. One important aspect of that, of the Nagoya Protocol, as well as the Biodiversity Act in India, is benefit sharing. And that is something the European countries and America is not talking about. So that is where everyone needs to come on the same platform. And India is pro the Nagoya Protocol. 196 countries have signed it. 196 countries have ratified it. And they have to have, based on that protocol, legislation which will help in implementation of that protocol. So based on that, I think, if I'm not wrong, the Nagoya Protocol was somewhere in the year 1996. And thereafter, now India has a Biodiversity Act of 2002. I will stand subject to correction, but then as long as I remember, as much as I remember, in 2002. So there needs to be a parallel legislation in all the countries so that this patent pooling will be a lot easier. And the front runners, I would say, in development of medicine, apart from India, need to come on the same page. So India has a very robust network when it comes to patent pooling. India has the legislation which it promised while signing the Nagoya Protocol in place, and it is very much effective. And under the same act, India is sharing its information with other countries. The information regarding the medicines, treatment, the effects, the genes, different aspects of development of a vaccine. So India does have an act in place. The legislation is very much there. India is signatory to the international protocol. There are conventions. As you must be knowing, Abhishek, there are different conventions which if countries sign, they are bound by it. So similarly, India is bound by that protocol. But again, as I said, there are a few countries, few nations, which are not on the same page. So it also depends on other countries to come on the same page and share similar kind of data. And again, as I said, the important aspect is benefit sharing. Now, most of the countries are not talking about benefit sharing. And these benefits would also imply benefits in terms of money. So if, say, India is today able to make a breakthrough in a medicine, and India gives the rights of production to another country for their own country, So there has to be a benefit sharing clause in such kind of a cooperation. So most of the countries are on the same page. Some countries which are front runners are not. So coming to India, India has a good legislation in place, and it is definitely helping us in sharing our data with other countries and taking other countries' data in developing medicine. But as uh, as a global community, everyone needs to come together.
I feel so amazing that India is such. I feel delighted that India is at such a pivotal position when it comes to IPR and specifically such concepts which are of modern times and which are helping in development. So this is where we move towards our last question, and this is one of this is the most amazing questions that I have found out, and I personally feel that because this speaks about the much pressed topic, the much pressed ideology of the Indian government, Atmanirbhar Bharat. Like when we talk about Atmanirbhar Bharat, we get to see that major steps relating to it are directed towards promoting entrepreneurs. Now, entrepreneurship is directly linked towards innovation, which immediately brings into spotlight the intellectual property rights and intellectual property laws. Like, what are the necessary changes that the Indian laws should witness in order to develop a safe and a secure environment for the entrepreneurs in context of IPR?
Okay. So Abhishek, I will deviate a bit from the topic, but I will still stay on the topic. So
Absolutely fine, sir.
see, entrepreneurship is something which can't come overnight to a person. So it has its root in the kind of education that a person gets. So from the very beginning, if you are made to study or made to learn a few things in a pattern where you're not made or where you're not allowed to think out of the box or to think for yourself, automatically that mind, that innovative mind is suppressed. Certainly, we have a lot of people who are having their own businesses, who are having their own ventures. But then these are the people who have not given into the pressures of this system that is there in the place. So it should start from the very basic ground level. It should start with the kind of education and the kind of imparting education. So as you know, there is a movement of letting people learn in their mother tongue, gradually letting them choose the subjects of their choice and not giving them the subjects which everyone has to learn at the same time. So it starts from that very aspect. So if a person wants to learn maths and arts at the same time, that is a choice that a person should get. Automatically, his innovative side is getting a good scope. That is one aspect. That is how things will gradually start. So a person of 22 or 23 years age, if you ask him, you go out and you start your own business, not everyone will be able to do that. But from the age of 4 and 5, if people are allowed to think on their own, if they are allowed to learn the way they are comfortable, automatically this will help to give us an atmosphere wherein everybody will be having something of their own. Even if they are in a place where they're working for somebody, they can have their own ideas and probably go to a place where they can make that place their own venture and start and maybe grow or take it to another level. That is one aspect. Now coming to the IPR aspect of having your own ventures or Atmanirbhar Bharat is going to be a reality only when we have a very robust or very strong network of laws and their implementation with respect to intellectual property. Now, with respect to patent, India is one of the front runners in the pharmaceutical industry in terms of production, in terms of the kind of medicines that we have. But when it comes to copyright, trademarks, geographical indicators, we aren't as advanced as some of other countries. So it won't be wrong to say that we are still at a very nascent stage. So this network of laws needs to be a lot more flexible. And as I suggested, that we need to have a one-window solution for other things, even for IPR, for people who want to have their own businesses set up, any kind of entity, needs to be given one place where they go and they have everything available at one place. So right from registration of a company, to securing the rights in the logo of the company, to securing the right in the mark that they are using as a trademark, to securing probably if a person is enterprising and has the capacity to design his own machine and have his own company at the same time, then get the patents for his design, get the patents for his manufacturing process wherever necessary. So all this needs to be unified, and there needs to be one uniform place. So as on today, the situation is you have to go to the website of a copyright registration, different entity for copyright registration. Trademark registry is separate. For patents, you need to have a person who is qualified to take your patent registration. And for geographical indicators, they are exclusive people who are dealing into that because they know the know-how and they know how things are working. So again, if a person has to run to 10 people, whether he will be in a position to handle what he is actually meant to do, or he will have to focus all his energies and finances to one person at a time and then move to 10 people. So we have different laws which cover most of the aspects of IPR, of companies, of any kind of corporate structures. But then there is no one window solution, as I say. I'm using this word again and again because it's very important. That we need to have one place where a person, if he has an idea, reaches and tells the person, these are the things that I want to do. And then that person, in turn, contacts different people for him and gets the entire mechanism in motion. And this is all a legal framework, a government setup I am talking about.
Yeah.
If that is in place, and which is very much possible because we have 10 things already in place. You just have to unite them. You just have to bring them under one roof and then have probably, so something as simple as a Google form can be used to collate all the material that a person is, having, and then distribute it amongst different departments. They do their work. They give it to the one coordinating department, and that department is coordinating with that one person. So laws need to be changed, modified in terms of getting everything under one roof. So if you are having a website of one state for all kinds of registration and licenses, why can't we have a website of each state or maybe one country? Like for say India has one website for all intellectual property registration. And then different links take you to different places. But then you will have a uniform, just the way we have our Aadhaar number. Similarly, one number can be given to a person. Entire details can be taken up under that. And that one window can help him get all the registrations under that one number. So it is easier for him to coordinate. Because as you know, as you're studying law, Abhishek, you must be knowing that a director has at least 4 to 5 different identification numbers.
Yes, sir.
By the time he starts his own company and he has, his business working. So if we can pull it and, get it under one single number and have one place doing all this work for one person, there would be no problem per se in terms of intellectual property. And I feel there are so many intellectual property enthusiasts in India, whether they are studying law or not, irrespective. There are so many people who know about intellectual property. That if we have these things in place, we can have a government and public cooperation kind of stuff, wherein people on their own are helping the government agencies set up such kind of a framework. And once that is done, these people can be given, probably some kind of post in that government department, so that it is easier to understand the real world problem. And the government is in fine tuning with the, problems of the people who are actually working. So I feel the laws are pretty much in place. You need to have a unified approach. And for all the questions that we have, discussed about so far, I feel the part where the problem starts, if you take care of that part, we don't go to the problem aspect. And if we actually do happen to go to the problem aspect, I would like to go one point forward and say that people are inclined towards going to court, the traditional system of court, the traditional framework of the legal, implementation authorities. But I feel considering the digitization that has happened, and over this period of 7 months, people have accepted mobiles, laptops, tablets to be, part of their life, integral part of their life. I think online resolution of disputes is one important aspect in all these topics, except for of course the patent pooling aspect. With respect to intellectual property, with respect to people having their own businesses, with respect to media, if there is an online dispute resolution mechanism which is as strong as the court system, then probably having legal framework in place wherein you don't have the problems in the first place. But if for some reason you end up having a problem or an issue, then having a system in place wherein you get the results in probably say like 1 month or 2 months, having dedicated professionals handling online dispute resolution, so we don't end up spending time going to court. We actually are sitting at our place the way we are now interacting, talking to a third person who is a professional and getting the dispute resolved. So not just having the legal framework, but also the framework to resolve these disputes. So solutions and resolutions, both the things need to be fine tuned. So I think that is going to, and again, both these things need a good strong legal framework. So which is in place. It needs a few modifications and tweaks as we have discussed. And of course, these are vast topics. So it's no amount of time would be good enough to discuss everything. But then of course, yeah, these are the few points which we need to take into consideration when we are talking about these specific 4 things that we have discussed so far.
So basically, when I try to put all of this into a basic understanding for a layman, so it's basically like the structure that we have, the base structure that we have is intact, is robust, but we will have to work on the procedural aspects in order to lessen them, so as to encourage the lot to appear more in to come in front. Okay, absolutely amazing. So, sir, thanks a lot for your wonderful inputs. They are extremely valuable to us, and these will certainly, I personally believe, and even the listeners would agree, that they will serve as a refined and pure understanding. And moreover, on behalf of the Statesmanship Program, I would like to extend a heartfelt thanks and heartfelt gratitude to our listeners, and I even encourage them to listen to our previous episodes. You can find them on all major podcast platforms and even on YouTube. Thanks a lot for joining us, sir. Hoping to have a more unified and a more better collaboration with you in our future. Thanks a lot. Signing off.
Thank you so much, Abhishek. Thank you so much.
Thanks a lot, sir. Thank you.